Yay! We got distracted. Oh yeah. What? You don't like it when I talk? What is up, everybody? Happy Monday. Our favorite day of the week. Tonight, Ginger Runner Live is a little bit earlier, so thank you for joining us an hour earlier if you are joining us live. Our dog, Gus, is having a fit. He is all jacked up right now.
We don't know why.
First of all, his head is soaking wet because we had the shower going, and he just loved to jump in. He's been chasing a fly all day. But our show is not about Gus tonight. We have an incredible guest tonight. This summer, and he's been doing all these incredible projects, really big projects around Colorado and around the States, and he's an incredibly talented ultra runner, cyclist, adventurer. Joe Grant is going to talk to us all about his Tour de 14ers, which is a project that he took on starting July 26th. Essentially summiting every 14er in Colorado. There's 57 of them. And he wanted to do it in the fastest known time, but self-supported and self-powered. Mind-blowing. Yeah. So we're going to talk all about that. And oh my God. I don't know. This is the first time. You want to be on the show, Gus? Do you want to ask Joe a bunch of... Yes, of course. So we're going to talk to Joe all about his adventure, how it went. If you are watching live, remember that Kim is in the chat room, so if you have questions during tonight's show, you can ask those at any time. Yes. Welcome to Ginger Runner Live. Ginger Runner. Yay! Kim is taking our dog to go get some treats, because apparently he is on fire tonight. Welcome, everyone, to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 135. I'm very excited for tonight's episode. If you were with us just there in the pre-show, our guest tonight, incredibly talented ultra runner, incredibly talented athlete, adventurer, and just an awesome, incredibly nice dude. We are joined by, yes, that is the sentence. It feels wrong coming out. We are joined by Mr. Joe Grant to talk all about his Tour de 14ers, summiting every 14,000-foot mountain in Colorado, all 57 of them, self-supported, self-powered. Joe Grant, welcome back to the show.
Yay! Thanks for having me.
I'm terribly sorry that our dog wants to steal the spotlight.
I think he's just very excited to see.
It's like Joe Grant.
Yeah, he's
Joe
very
Grant.
excited to see Joe. Oh,
Tour de 14ers. So first question. Well, I guess the first thing is I am sorry for our dog. The second is, how are you recovering? How are you doing now? You're a couple weeks here removed from this incredible adventure. Are you relaxing? Are you kicking your feet up? Are you eating all the things?
Yeah, it's I do feel quite a bit better. I think it's been about a month now. So a decent amount of time, to recover. Physically and mentally felt pretty good. Honestly, the hardest part was just kind of getting back into the routine of daily life and getting back into to work and social life and all that. That was definitely bit more intense than I kind of anticipated. It's like a bit of a reverse sort of culture shock coming back from a month alone.
Yeah, man, I can't even fathom. We're gonna find out all about my words are not coming out tonight. Gus just got me off to a real rough start. We're gonna find out all about this adventure because you were off grid for over a month, self-supported, self-powered. And I'm really excited to find out about this. I'm terrible with my sentences.
Maybe it was that early flight this
morning. It was that early flight. That's possibly it. Zero sleep. We're going to find out all about the Tour de 14ers on tonight's show. If you are watching live, welcome. Happy Monday. If you have any questions during tonight's show,
I'm in the chat room as usual, and everybody's already saying, "Yeah, Joe, way to go!" And Paul says, "Joe, I followed your trip on Instagram. It was great. Thanks for sharing everything."
Yes, and I think before we even get into this with Joe, I want to recommend everyone just go to his Instagram, instagram.com/alpineworks. Follow along. You'll have to scroll back a little bit because it was a month and a half ago, actually. Yeah, month and a half-ish, yeah. So you'll have to scroll back in some photos, but you'll be able to kind of follow along with the adventure as Joe begins to talk about it with visual cues and photos, and his photos are incredible. He's such a fantastic photographer, so it's a kind of a great way to take the journey along with Joe as he tells the story. Also, before we get into that, I have to say a huge thank you to all of the viewers and supporters of Ginger Runner Live, and especially the Patreon crew, because this weekend was the Trail Running Film Festival up in Seattle, the big festival, 3-day festival, and I am blown away. Wonderland, the film that we did last year following Gary around Mount Rainier with the FKT, and actually Joe's run that trail before too. He's very familiar with the Wonderland Trail. Almost got attacked by a mountain lion. We had him on the show. He talked about that, which is incredible. Wonderland won Best Feature at the festival, and I can't believe it. It got me very emotional at the time, because I have a lot of people to thank, and primarily you guys, the viewers, who have been supporting the channel and supporting everything we've been doing here for a number of years and allowing us to continue to do these things, including making the films and funding the films essentially through Patreon. So thank you. Of course, a big thank you to Gary Robbins for running real fast. That was great. Big thank you to Jeff Peltier, who was a cameraman that ran close to 35 miles during that day and followed Gary out there, was one of the few people that was able to keep up with Gary during that adventure and getting some beautiful shots. And of course, the entire crew, Yassine, Willie McBride, Jeff and Jen, Rich White, Kim, and Max, who was even out there for a couple miles too. So big thank you to the entire crew. We got Best Feature. So this is, Gus is going crazy tonight. I have a giant framed Best Feature award that I will probably bring and put on the back wall here, but I could not fly with it because it was that big. It was too big to fly with, and I had too many carry-ons. So thank you, everybody. Really, really cool. And that maybe is also why I can't put sentences together right now, because I'm still excited. I'm still reeling off of all that excitement.
It was a pretty big deal. Congratulations.
I've never won an award. So this was the first time I haven't ever. And so this was kind of a big deal. So
it's a huge deal.
I'm really still very excited about it. And again, I have everyone out there to thank. Okay. I can't wait to hear more about Tour de 14ers.
I don't know what.
We need to bring him up. Dude,
we're so sorry. I don't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay. Tour de 14ers is an incredible project, Joe. What was the inspiration? How did this all start for you? When did it begin? Like just the thought of doing something this big?
Yeah, well, I've lived in Colorado for 6 years now. I actually went to college, an exchange program in Durango. And that was 13, 14 years ago now. So, love the state of Colorado, have for a long time. And just the 14ers are really iconic to the state of Colorado.
Sure.
And I feel I'm really fortunate to get to travel a lot for running every year. And it seems like at the end of every summer, I'm always like, I really need to make time to explore the state more. Because so much great stuff to do. And so it was just kind of a matter of, putting it on the calendar and deciding like, okay, I'm going to commit to staying home in the state of Colorado for this year and or like for this summer. And then that was kind of the start. And then the 14ers have been done in a variety of ways, all sorts of different kind of records and such around the 14ers. And a couple of years ago, Justin Simoni did it in this style, so on a bike and on foot. And I liked that style because you're able to travel a decent amount of distance between the peaks, as opposed to say like doing it in a through hike, which would take a long time. But you're still under your own power. And then being able to leave from my doorstep and then returning home was kind of a cool aspect to it as well.
Yeah, it's definitely different because, you could imagine linking, this is a lot of peaks. It's 14,000 peaks. You can imagine linking them together with car rides or, getting like a RV or something where you can sleep at night and that sort of thing. Was there some sort of philosophy that you're going for by doing the self-supported, self-powered version of this? Was there something that drew you to that specifically? Because it's next level. Like just doing the feat with a car or something is already extreme, but then to take out the element of security like that. What was your draw to that?
Yeah, I think it's a really different challenge. I mean, logistically, it's a lot harder actually to do it in the car, because everything has to line up so well to be able to. Like Andrew Hamilton has the record in which is just over 9 days, linking all the peaks. Driving to the trailheads.
Trailheads, okay.
Well, basically, you have to complete 3,000 feet between each summit to be able to count it as a summit.
Okay.
But Andrew Hamilton did that in 9 days, so it's tons of sleep deprivation, lots of logistics. It's a really kind of blast through the mountains, literally. So that I think it's a really incredible record, and I think it's a really incredible feat. But I just kind of connected to maybe moving a little bit slower, being able to see more of between the mountains too, because there's a lot of incredible terrain that's just that you do get to cover on the bike. So I was kind of attracted to that. And then just doing it under my own power. I like the simplicity of just kind of pushing off from my door and doorstep, and then just looping around the whole state under my own power. And if I was to do it only on foot, it would have probably taken me couple 3 months to complete, which time that just it would have been a lot more a lot longer trip. So
how much logistics and planning did you have to set aside leading into this? I mean, not only planning gear, but planning route, planning safety measures, like I'm going to sleep on these peaks, or did you do any of that?
Well, the start date and sort of the part of the route was kind of established because there's a private peak in the southern part of the state called Culebra Peak, and they don't issue any permits in August, or at least they didn't this year. So the latest date I could get a permit for was July 30th. And so because of where it's located and the fact that I'm traveling on a bike, it just sort of dictated what I was going to kind of need to do in terms of peaks before getting there. And then being in the south, that would kind of dictate, where my route would go next, essentially. Okay. So kind of the way the loop worked out was mainly just kind of a logical link up from, starting from home, going to Culebra, and then kind of moving on from there.
Yeah, just like following the journey and knowing that you started and finished at home, that adds a unique spin to it too. Where did you literally leave from your front doorstep and just consider that the start finish?
Yep. Yeah, no, that was kind of the idea, was just to Long's Peak is the closest peak to my house. It's also north of where I live, and so actually I decided it's my favorite peak, and I wanted to. Traditionally, people kind of finish with Long's Peak when they do the link ups of the 14ers, and it just made sense for me to do it that way as well. But it did involve biking by the road to my house, kind of at midnight on the last night in the pouring rain, knowing that there's like 7 miles to go to my house, or sort of 40 miles to Long's up the peak, and then 40 miles back. So there was a bit of an additional mental pressure finishing up that way. But
I can imagine there's that instinct, not necessarily instinct, but like the draw to just call it quits multiple times, because you're probably near a town or you're near some sort of comfort that would just take you out of the suffering. Was this large project full of suffering, or were you able to just kind of pace yourself each day to the point where you would push to exhaustion, but not to the point of just wanting to quit and drop out completely?
There were a lot of ups and downs. I never considered dropping unless I got my sort of bike stolen, or my injured badly or something. There was the main challenges to start was this time constraint with Culebra Peak down south, and so that I did hard rock 10 days before starting. Well, I should say I did half of hard rock, and then got injured during the race.
You hit like side story, because this is also like crazy side story. You hit your head in a tunnel, right? Bad. I
essentially coming into Ouray, banged my head on this low tunnel coming into town, and then landed flat on my back, and just didn't in the moment just didn't really recover that well from it during the race. Kind of had some issues with balance, and yeah, it was a bit of a challenging situation, unexpected for sure.
And this is right before you started this Tour de Fortiners, like 2 weeks, right? Or a week?
Yeah, it was 10 days out. And so again, it was kind of, I had a lot of trouble getting the permit for Culebra. So kind of the way I established my schedule was to do Hard Rock and probably start probably 3 weeks after Hard Rock was the initial plan. So somewhere around the end of the first week of August. And that would have, I think, given me enough time to recover properly. Then when I had the permitting to July 30th, since I was in Hard Rock, I didn't want to give up that opportunity either. So that kind of just dictated, like, okay, now you have to start on such and such a date. Like essentially I gave myself 5 days to get down to Culebra, and also give myself just a little bit of time to recover, which, yeah.
Was it a full-on concussion? Because like I know Dominic Grossman, our friend, was there and witnessed that, yeah, you were not in great shape after you hit your head, because it must have been hard. Was it a full-on concussion?
Well, I mean, I think I learned that concussion is a very broad-ranging term. So yeah, I definitely had an impact to my head that influenced my ability to kind of, yes, my balance and just sort of, I was pretty muddled and a little nauseous, and it was just not a great situation. So I felt like it wasn't the best idea to keep going another 50 miles through the night.
Sure. I mean, even now, just looking back, that may have been, who knows, that may have been the best thing, because if you were 10 days later starting this Tour de Fortiners, which this is a project that you've actually talked about on the show before when we had you on last year, it was something that you had mentioned that it was going to be happening this year. So maybe that was a good thing. Maybe that was a good thing that you just had to stop 50 miles short and you got to save your body a little bit more for this Tour de Fortiners thing. Who knows? We have tons of questions going on in the live chat room. I do not want to ignore the live chat room tonight, because I think this is a really fantastic way for people to get Joe answering questions and stuff like that. So Kim, what do we have? Sure.
Question from Nathaniel. How did you train for this endeavor? Did you change anything or stick to your usual training?
Well, the good thing about actually running Hard Rock is that it does it does sort of, it's very similar. I mean, there's one 14er that is summited during the race. It's a lot of altitude training, a lot of vertical. So on the running side of things, I just prepared for Hard Rock as I normally would. And then in the spring, I did the Arizona Trail Race, which is, we might have discussed on the show last time, but it's basically a mountain bike race across Arizona from the border of Mexico to the border of Utah. Yep. And so that was kind of, I had the 14ers in mind in terms of wanting to dial in some gear, just kind of get more experience bike packing, and so I figured I would use that in April as good prep on the bike, and then use my Hard Rock training to just be sort of, for my running conditioning, basically.
Let's do one more there.
Sure. And a second part to that question from Nathaniel as well is, how do you prepare mentally for epic adventures such as this?
Yeah, great question. Because you knew this was going to be a big undertaking. It's different than the JMT. It's not it's not like a 100-miler or a 200-miler sort of project. This is a big one. So how did you mentally train for that?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of things. One is, and I kind of feel this way about when I run 100-milers, is that it's a little bit more casual in some ways mentally, because like a 50K, 50-miler, or even 100K is very physical kind of event. It's there's obviously mental aspects to it, of course, but then on a full 24-hour kind of event, you have to sort of pace yourself over that time. So I felt like going into this, in some ways it was a little bit more casual, because you can't, like, it's such a big undertaking. You sort of put yourself in the best position physically to be ready, and then basically go for it and see how you do, you know. And I found that sometimes it's actually really hard to predict. Like I would do really, really big back-to-back days and, you know, kind of wake up thinking that I was going to be super wrecked and actually feel quite good. And then other days when I felt, you know, I would either be easier days and more casual, it would sort of catch up to me. And so mentally, you know, I think a lot of it's about being kind of flexible and relaxed and just sort of, you know, letting things basically evolve and see how things you know, sort of what comes up. And in some ways it syncs with the weather a lot of the times, which is basically the weather was really challenging during the trip. And I feel like my mental disposition kind of was just, well, there's not anything that you can do about the weather. So basically just got to adapt to the situation every day. And I think that was kind of my mindset going in, was just kind of, you know, try my best, but also just kind of letting things unfold as they do.
Did you have any sort of time goals or estimations as far as when you would return? Was that going through your head the whole time? Were you shooting to break this previous record of 34 days?
No. The record set, I mean, it was the standard set by Justin was a really nice framework, you know, to kind of, there's somebody who's done this. This is a general, you know, Justin's a great athlete and does a lot, rides his bike. I don't think he's been in a car this year. So he's been traveling by bike, you know, everywhere. And so he's very dialed into kind of this lifestyle. And so I had a lot of kind of respect for and inspiration, you know, from his journey. And so it really served as a good framework for me to just be like, okay, so it's roughly going to take about a month, you know, is the sort of the idea there, which helps with planning and just kind of general kind of gauging, you know, how long roughly you're going to be out there.
Sure, and that's probably also fluid, right? So that can change purely because you are doing this kind of day to day, that you could let your family know that, oh yeah, you know, I'm a day behind or whatever, right? Yeah,
I mean, the other thing is though is outside of this permit, you know, once I got down to Culebra, so that there's a real time imperative there. It's a single day permit, so I can't miss that day basically. So once I'd done that, everything else was just basically based on the weather. And I say that, but it was kind of a continuous stream. You know, I wanted to keep moving as best as I could every day. And then just kind of see, of course I had ideas of what I was going to do, and there's clusters and, you know, there's things that are relatively set in terms of I have to kind of complete this in a day. But there's also a certain amount of flexibility to, you know, I can bike through the night, or I can stop, or I can, you know, so I can adapt as I go, feeling what the weather's doing and just kind of what makes the most sense, you know.
Got it. Now there are 57 peaks along in the Rockies here. We've only been to Boulder once, so we've been able to see the Front Range and see Long. So our experience on any 14er is zero. In this case, there's 57 peaks. I'm guessing of varying difficulty. Coloradans are going to, again, I hope it's Coloradans or Coloradodians. They're going to be watching this going, this guy doesn't know anything about 14ers. It's true. I don't. I'm guessing there's a varying range of difficulties, different classes of climbing. Some are probably easier compared to others that involve more technical climbing and stuff like that. Had you summited all 57, or at least a large majority, before you undertook this, or was there a vast majority of them that you hadn't even seen, and were you worried about those in any way, or did you do research on all of them?
Yeah, so just so as a side note, there's 54 official named 14ers, okay. And then there's 4 additional named summits, summits that don't have enough difference between the neighboring peak to be considered a separate summit. So there's a total of 58, and I summited 57 because Mount Bras, one of the peaks, is private and close to the public. So that's what makes up that number. But yeah, to your question, there are varying degrees of technical difficulty. Mostly our peaks are not that, well, the standard routes on nearly all of the peaks are not very technical compared to, like, say, the California 14ers or something like that.
Sure.
And so, yeah, for the most part, it was just a matter of the technical part between peaks. So if I was going to take a ridge to, instead of running back down to the trail and taking the standard route up, that ridge might have been more technical than say taking a standard route up. So it rarely exceeds fourth class terrain in difficulty. There's a few areas where there's little bits of fifth class terrain, but that was not so frequent.
Did you know a lot of that going into it, or you knew today I'm doing 3 peaks, the first 2 of which have class 3, class 4? Did you know that sort of data before going into each peak, or were some of it a surprise?
Yeah, so I had done probably a little under half of the peaks, and actually some of the more technical ones I hadn't seen before. So what was interesting was that I kind of built that up maybe in my head as being more difficult than it actually was. So I'd really bring my A game to peaks that I'd never seen before and think, okay, this is going to be a really hard outing, and just be focused, and do your best and all that. Whereas peaks that I already done that may be more casual, even just, a hike up, ended up sometimes being more difficult because, it's more of a grind and just, not being as engaged sort of mentally, just saying, okay, well, it's beautiful and everything, but it's just this long hike up the peak and I'm super tired. And whereas in new terrain, you're a lot more engaged and kind of have to be focused because, So.
And yeah, the chat room is even bringing up very specific peaks. Chuck Hall, who is a Coloradian. I'm going to get it wrong.
Has anybody corrected you yet?
I haven't been able to keep up. I'm guessing I'm getting it right because I'm always right. But Chuck Hall is bringing up Bross Peak, saying that it's technically private, but everyone climbs it anyways. And they were talking about land use, and you mentioned the private peak. What makes that private? And is it something that you couldn't summit purely because it's land that doesn't belong to national parks or any of that kind of thing, or the logistics behind that?
So Bross specifically it's actually owned by, I think there's 120 mining claims on the peak. So it's just the very top that you can't summit. And it's the main reason I didn't do Bross is because there's a sign at the trailhead and also on the 14ers.com initiative that basically says that, summiting the peak would compromise future discussions to be able to make it publicly accessible. Whether I agree with that or not is kind of irrelevant. It's essentially just, to me, it felt like there was a broader community implication, and that by doing that, it wasn't just sort of, I'm not entitled, to summit it. And so it wasn't really my, I didn't feel like it was my place to kind of go up there and summit the peak. But because it could have had a greater, kind of community repercussion. So that's basically why I chose to not do that summit.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm also really curious on some of the technical choices, as far as you would ride your bike to a trailhead, and would you then lock it up there and use a specific trail to the summit, whatever the major trail was? Or would you take the bike up as high as you could? I don't know, mountain bike rules might be different in Colorado, but would you take the bike up as high as you could and then summit on foot? Or was there ever a summit you could do on your bike, or any of those kind of things? Technically, what did you do to kind of link all this stuff up?
So I didn't summit any peaks on the bike. And the reason for that, I think there's 16 maybe that you can ride to the very top, most of which are kind of technical. Or too technical to really make it worth pushing the bike to the summit. You could certainly do it if you didn't have a loaded bike and just wanted to, ride the 14er. Really, the only one that I considered doing that kind of made sense was Pikes Peak. And I ended up going from the backside and Crags Campground up to about 11,500 feet, and just deciding that it wasn't really worth pushing all the way to the top. And so I just stashed the bike in the bushes and ran up to the top. And so that was really, what I tried to do is basically be the most logical in terms of if I could get the bike up to a point that made sense, that would save my legs on the way down, and that wouldn't involve, a too much strain in terms of getting the bike up there, I would do that. And, just try and, sort of make it easier on myself, kind of to leaving basically the peak. Also, in some cases, for example, the Blanca group, I went up to Lake Como. That road is a huge mess. It's a Jeep road. It's really, really rocky. It probably wasn't worth pushing all the way to the top. I ended up breaking my rim on the way down on the way down that road. So I kind of regretted it a little bit afterwards. But that was something that, the day when I was going up Lake Como, it was middle of the afternoon. I don't really have anything else to do, So I was like, well, I may as well just push the bike up there. I'd never been to the lake. So I didn't know exactly how bad the road was, but, I'll push the bike up there, camp there for the night, do the Blanca group the following day, and then be able to have my bike staged to be able to bike out the next day.
I'm so curious about that kind of thing, because like you're out there in remote country too. You're bringing up the fact that you broke a rim. I want to get to gear questions here in a second. I know that we have a lot in the chat room too. Want to talk about what sort of specifics with gear, and this is going to dovetail in nicely with what parts of gear like failed and how did you solve those problems. We got questions in the chat room about that. Before we get to that, I was really curious as far as, would you sleep on mountaintops? Would you sleep on trail sides? Would you go into town at night, or was it a mix of all of the above?
I never slept on a mountaintop, but the rest was a mix. It was so mostly my sleep system was a bivy sack and a sleeping bag, and that was on my bike. So for me, the way I planned it was that my bike essentially was my, where I could carry my food and my sleeping system. So I had a running vest, so I didn't really have the ability to, carry my sleeping bag in. I could, but it would just been a pain. Like I'd have to, carry it separately from my pack to stage further down, the trail below the mountain. So I'd always start essentially from my bike to go up the peaks. So that was that's also dictated by wilderness and just kind of where. So sometimes it's the trailhead, sometimes it was sort of where the wilderness boundary started, and you're not allowed to ride your bike in wilderness. So leaving the bike, basically as close as I could to that spot. And then when I went through towns, there was in the San Juans, I got a few. So when I broke my rim, I had to stay 2 days in Alamosa to wait for a new rim to come and get that fixed. And so I stayed 2 nights in a motel there. And what I planned on doing, and which I ended up doing also on the trip, was kind of getting rooms occasionally to recharge my batteries of all the electronics and kind of clean up a little bit and sort of get a proper restorative night of sleep to be able to kind of set up for the rest of the trip.
And that all still works within the self-supported mindset, right? Because you're not getting assistance from someone out in the middle of the trail. You're not getting a food drop or anything like that. It's all you're supporting yourself completely. Yeah,
it's do it yourself. So I wouldn't be allowed to stay at a friend's house. But you're allowed to get a hotel room, which kind of sucked actually, because I've known a lot of people in Colorado, obviously. So it would
right.
be, sort of coming through town and being like, well, if I really need a room, then I have to go and get a room, otherwise I'm out camping. So,
right.
so it's as long as it's open to everybody, that's totally fine. And then obviously like the trail ferry kind of component can come in if there's random encounters that are not planned and somebody, gives you something, then that's okay. It's just that I can't call somebody up with specific demands or, have them meet me somewhere or accompany me on the peak, giving me like directions or, things like that. So you're not allowed assistance in that way. And again, this is kind of just arbitrary rules that are established kind of by the bikepacking crowd, in terms of like bikepacking racing. The general idea is just do it yourself, basically.
Yeah, got it. Tons of questions still from the chat room. So let's get a couple of those.
Yeah, a couple gear-related questions. Question from Nathaniel. Did you suffer from any gear or equipment failures out there, which is kind of what you're addressing with the bike? Was there anything else? If so, how did you recover? How did you deal with it?
So I had only minor gear issues. So on the seventh day, I think, I broke the rim on the bike. And so that was probably the biggest issue that I had in terms of bike-related issues, because it was a 2-day waiting for a new rim. I couldn't change that myself on the trail. I did tear one sidewall on a tire, on my back tire coming into Aspen. I was just super lucky because it happened just before I got to town, so I was able to get a new tire put on over lunch, which was just kind of random and lucky. And then I broke, I run a belt drive on the bike, and broke one of those, but also carried a spare for that. So I was able to switch to a spare, my spare. And so that worked out as well. So on the bike front, minor issues that I got kind of lucky, and those were easy to fix. And then, other than that, my shoes, I changed. I wore one pair of running shoes for the first half, and then mailed a pair to Buena Vista, and that was going to be my halfway point, and then basically just switched out into a new pair for the second half of the trip, and that lasted me for the second half. So pretty much everything else worked. It didn't have any gear. I mean, I didn't bring that much gear, so everything that I brought, I know is super reliable, and just had good confidence in what I had with me, and so and thankfully nothing major.
Actually, let's talk a little bit about the gear. What specifically did you carry with you? Because I know you had to probably go light. What were you dealing with on your back and on your bike?
So on me, I basically just worked, from shorts and t-shirt is what I wore. So I just wear running shorts and running shirt on and off the bike. So I didn't have any different clothes for riding and for running. And then I kind of up top, I just worked my way out from a windbreaker, a medium layer, kind of warmer long sleeve jacket kind of thing, a puffy, and then a rain jacket. And then for bottoms, I had a pair of puff pants and a pair of rain pants. And then I brought a pair of night socks, which is basically just my dry socks for wearing at night. And I bought a merino wool buff also for the night as well. And then I had a couple buffs for during the day, a heavier one, and then just a headband one. And that was basically the clothing system. Oh, I had gloves as well, bike gloves, and then some just like leather work gloves, which actually were super practical and work really well for scrambling and stuff. And then sleep system, I brought a bivy sack and a sleeping bag, and bike tools, and then camera. I brought a GoPro, a Sony RX100 little point and shoot camera to film. Mm-hmm. And so I used the GoPro and the Sony to film, and then my phone and updates and stuff. So I also had a external battery pack to charge those. My bike also runs on an internal hub system, so I can actually charge somewhat well. Small batteries and things like that.
Like through USB, right?
Yeah, basically you just so at night I have the light option, and then you switch it to a USB plug, and it's pretty low output, so you can charge like one of those little small little batteries, and then use that to recharge your phone or headlamp or things like that. So.
Got it. Yeah. I was really curious about that. And then there's another question here regarding calories and food. Were you having to carry a large amount of food for each day, or would you do how would you do that?
Yeah, so I didn't carry a stove, so that all my food had to be somewhat portable when I would leave. So a lot of that involved I had a lot of junk food, but it was also kind of just what I could get. So if I was in town and I could get a decent meal, then I would, or go to a grocery store and get some fresh food, that would be great. But otherwise, when I'm actually carrying on the bike, I would do a lot of frozen burritos. So just like bean and cheese frozen burritos that I would let thaw out in the frame bag of the bike. Lots of candy bars and trail mix, things that you can find at a 24-hour gas station, basically. It wasn't too glamorous on the food front.
Do you miss any of that food, or have your taste buds just completely outlawed that from returning into your diet?
For me, it was very utilitarian. It's I eat well and I love food and I love to cook, and it's not something that that I particularly enjoy doing. Like it's fine, eating junk food once in a while. And I just feel that for this, it just worked the best. It was the easiest, simplest way, relatively cheap. It's actually interesting how expensive junk food can be.
Sure.
And it sucks. Sometimes you're like, I spent how much on Snickers, but yeah, I think it's just it was just the easiest way to get a decent amount of calories that are portable. I had a lot of trail mix, those kind of bags of nuts and anything that had a little bit more density and fat to it was a good choice. I'd say the only thing I really struggled with was not having coffee. Although I did use some of those little double espresso shots, cans of coffee. When it worked out from town, I carry those up to the trailhead at night, slam a couple in the morning, and then crush them, put them back on the bike, and so that would kind of help a little bit on the coffee front. But
sure, yeah, because you're not bringing a stove, so you can't just go make a fresh percolated cup of coffee or something.
Yeah, and you can do. I mean, stoves are so light nowadays, and it's not really, it wasn't really about weight and such. It's just about keeping everything really, really simple. So same reason for just doing a bivy sack and sleeping bag. It's not always the best, setup. It's pretty, pretty minimal. But it's also really easy. It takes me 10 seconds to set up my camp. And so when you're really tired, and a lot of times that's just something that's worked pretty well for me, was just, pulling the bag out, crawl into it, eat a handful of peanuts, and go to sleep.
That's it.
Yeah. I mean, it gets pretty, I don't know. And I think if you go into it feeling, I just felt sort of indifferent to that. I just knew that this was going to be simple, that it was going to work. There's little that can fail in that system. And if it really, really got super dire, I can always get a room. I mean, it's Colorado. It's not, it's not that far removed from towns and places. So.
Yeah, backcountry it's fairly relative. You're still, within 20 to 30 miles, I'm guessing, from some sort of civilization at any given moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's always, and occasionally you'll see people. I mean, there's definitely situations where it's best not to mess up, because you are pretty far. Just logistically, it'd be kind of tough to get out. But you're not that far from places, and so yeah, you go through tons of little towns, and there's always like a little gas station or something that you can find. So, and you have self-service almost everywhere. Yeah, so it's not that remote. You can feel remote. You can definitely feel remote. I mean, you can be 15 miles out of town and up on a mountain. And the town's pretty small, so it's not like a bustling, huge city or something. But so you can feel kind of remote and alone, but it's not, relatively speaking, it's not Alaska.
Right. Tons of questions. What do we got, Kim?
Question from Training for Ultra in the chat room. With minimal gear, did you ever find yourself wishing you brought something that you didn't?
And yes, that's a great question.
Actually, I did not. I really like my setup. I would do pretty much everything exactly the same. In terms of, it's just, I think for this trip, it just fit what I wanted to do really well. And there's a couple times I was like, oh, my gear's good. It just works. Sometimes it's just, you get, there's little mini, like micro tweaks that I would make and things that I might change, but it's not, like the stove, I wouldn't be completely, set on like, I would never, take a stove. And that could be something where, that would also change. Like I could use like, backpackers meals and things like that. So there's obviously like things that could be a little bit different, taking a tarp instead of a bivy sack. But that would involve some stakes and having to put up the tarp. And there's a lot of days where that would have been super great. Like in the San Juans, it rained continuously. And if I got to a trailhead at say 4 or 5 in the evening, and it doesn't get dark until like 8:30, I'm sort of hanging out, in the pouring rain and, under, with my bivy sack and my bike. So it's not, in cases like that, it would have been nice to set up a little camp and kind of have a bit more, I guess, luxurious setup. But overall, I was super happy with what I brought. And wouldn't really change much.
We got Jason Coop in the chat room. What's up, Jason? Welcome, man. Former guest of the show and also badass coach. Just coached Casey Lichtai to a big victory. His question, Joe, your gear worked the whole time, but did your curly locks work? That's the real question.
The curly locks started to form one monologue by the end, which I just decided to just kind of keep my buff on for probably the last 10 days of the trip and not address any of the locks. So they were frozen time. Frozen in time.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I was actually really curious just kind of what the day-to-day would be for you. Were you going for a certain amount of mileage per day? What was your biggest day? Would you go into the night or any 24-hour days? Just kind of your time management. How did that work out for you?
Well, so, in the summer in Colorado, this thunderstorms are the big issue. And weather was certainly, I would say, the most challenging component of the trip and something attentive to. So weather is kind of what a lot of times dictated, when ideally you want to start going up the mountains in the morning. That's not always going to work out, but as much as I could, I would try to get to the trailhead in the evening. And hopefully the ideal scenario is to get to the trailhead at 7 p.m. and then have hour and a half to kind of just chill before dark, go to sleep, get up just before sun up, and then start going. There is some fluidity to that just based on what the weather was doing, and a lot of times I'd have to wait out storms in the afternoon, and that would make me get to the next peak a little bit later, and so occasionally I did have to go later in the night than I would have wanted to because of weather. But my plan was to do peaks and clusters, so it actually works out fairly logically, in terms of just like what you do when you sort of get to a cluster of peaks, do those peaks, move on to the next cluster. And my goal is to always try and be at those peaks the night before to then be able to start in the morning.
I'm really curious just as far as like, what was the toughest day for you out there? I mean, did you run into some really dark days of having to really grind out miles that you didn't want to grind out? And what was the toughest, like you were talking about weather, and I'm sure that the weather can get nasty, hearing stories from Hard Rock in the past, and that's earlier in the summer. Did you have really dangerous situations, or what was like the worst day?
Yeah, not really dangerous, but I mean, like I said, it started off super intense because I had to get down to Culebra fast. And so it started off really like a race, and I didn't really want that to be that way, but it was just how it worked out. So there was sleeping a couple hours a night, riding huge days, summiting the peaks, and it was just a very kind of frenzied, start to get down south. Once I was done with that, I moved into the San Juans, and it was monsoon season, rain continuously throughout my time there. There's 14 peaks in the San Juans and about 250 miles of riding between the peaks. So it's a pretty big cluster. And I came out of that. I hadn't done a lot of those peaks either. So I kind of came out of the San Juans just a little bit mentally worn out. And it was just a pretty strenuous, but I got to the Southern Swatch after that. So that's familiar terrain for me. And that was actually, so I was about halfway in the trip, and that's when I hit my biggest low, which I didn't expect at all. I got halfway, I thought, okay, I'm going, I'm moving north, I'm moving home, I'm in familiar terrain. And so you kind of let down your guard, and all of that accumulation of sort of, the race start to the weather in the San Juans just kind of all hit me at once. So I was going up a really trivial peak of Mount Antero, and hit a huge wall on that, just like staggering. It's a road to the top, like a dirt road. And and it was one of those like deep bonks, like sort of beyond kind of bonking, where you just, it's more of just that accumulation of, the couple weeks that I've already been out there, and just everything compounded into one, that made it really tough. So that was one of the more challenging moments on the trip, from a physical standpoint. And I'd say like the end was pretty hard too. Like the last 11 peaks, it kind of similar. It was I sort of let down my guard after the Elks, which I'd never done before, and it kind of more challenging. And then just thought, okay, now I'm heading home. I've got 11 to go. And it started snowing a lot. So the weather, it was just kind of this frustrating, like, just getting worked. And I knew exactly sort of what was ahead of me. And so that, I think it just became a bit of a grind. It was fun at first to have the snow in late August. And then, after a couple of days of it, you're like, okay, a little bit of sun and easy would be nice, Yeah.
More Snickers, extra Snickers somewhere, please.
Yeah.
Kind of hearing about some of the worst parts. We have a question from Steven as far as what's your favorite peak. I'm actually really curious what's your favorite peak, but what was your favorite day? Was there a moment that you went, this is the best choice I've made in my life? Was there any spiritual enlightenment that you managed to achieve during this adventure?
No spiritual enlightenment, but there was definitely some special days. My favorite peak's Long's Peak, and started before the trip. My favorite peak was Long's Peak, and after having seen them all, it's still Long's Peak. So I just really like Long's, and it's an interesting peak. There's a lot of technical routes to get up it. It's the closest one to home, and yeah, I just really like Long's. But that being said, there was amazing areas like the Crestones, the Blanca Group, the Chicago Basin and the San Juans, the Elks. All of those were just really, really amazing. Like Snowmass and Capitol, I thought was phenomenal. The Bells were phenomenal. So there was just a lot of those days where I do big link ups and spend all day in the mountains, and it would work out. I kind of made it out, and it was just so there's moments like that were just super awesome. I just felt, I don't know, you on a trip this long, you feel the scope of the whole range of emotions, from being very, very vulnerable, super emotional, feeling very weak, to being kind of surprised at how well your body's doing, and then also like, wow, I'm doing this and this is going okay, and wow, look at that mountain go, and just like, or for instance, camping on Princeton at 12,000 feet during the meteor shower, that was an amazing night, so there's just, I think there was just a lot of, it's a big slice of life, with all the real highs and just those moments where you can't believe that you're out there and how awesome it is. And then other moments where you're just not so happy and, and aren't feeling, just feeling vulnerable. And but I think that's what's kind of interesting about it,
Well, we just showed the picture of Long's Peak, which is the final 14er that you summited on your 57 summit adventure, which is ridiculous, self-powered, self-supported. It's a huge undertaking. It's an incredible accomplishment. There will be very few humans on this planet throughout time that will complete this task. What was it like riding your bike back into town, back to your front porch? Tell me there was 300 people waiting there cheering you on with signs and cake and all that.
It's funny because it was very anticlimactic, actually. I somewhat accidentally sort of got to Long's Peak Trailhead at 3 a.m. It was just kind of how it worked out. I finished Grays and Torreys, which were the 2 peaks before that, and got to Georgetown, which is about I think it's about 80 miles or so to Longs from there. And I'm so close. I'm wrapping it up. I'm nearly done. So I just decided that through the night and get to Longs, which was not my initial plan. So I got there at 3 a.m. and I was just gonna take a nap on the bench there at the trailhead. But I got there and there's all these people like getting ready to go hiking. Like people get up really early to go hiking. And so, I get there and they're like, hey, good morning. And, we're going hiking. I was like, well, all right, well, I guess we're going hiking, And so I decided to go out at 3 a.m. So it was kind of cool because I summited the peak at sunrise, and it was snowing, so it's quite, it was like that, icy and snow, and it's just a really spectacular summit, all to myself. And there was a big inversion, so there's all these clouds rolling in, and that's super cool. But then, biked home, and my wife was at work, and my dog was here. And my friend Fred came to shoot a couple photos, and that was it, And in some ways, I don't know, I kind of liked it that way, It was this, it's kind of started like that, I had breakfast and left home, and I sort of rolled back in, and that was it. But I don't know, I thought it was a kind of a nice way to finish. Like it wasn't. It didn't need to be anything, extravagant or crazy. Like I definitely got my fair share of really cool moments, so.
I think that's what's really incredible about this. It is such a personal journey, and just hearing you describe it, I'm like, this is something that Joe did, and it will be an experience that you will be able to live with and look back on. And I believe that there's a film of some sort that you obviously collected footage, but I believe other people did as well. So there will be some sort of project that will come out in the future.
I is actually the only one filming. Yeah. So
okay.
it will be shaky camera, and in the moment, personal account of the trip. Dean Leslie from Wandering Fever be producing the film. So
nice.
I'm super fortunate to have, him working on the project. So I kind of just gave him all the footage that I got, and so he'll hopefully work his magic to cover up my lack of filming skills.
There is no one better. Dean Leslie's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see what he's going to do with it, and we'll probably have a narration and kind of make a nice story hopefully out of it. So.
You should get Richard Attenborough to narrate it. I don't think he's alive still, but he's the voice of the Nature Channel shows. Nice. It was a joke. It was a terrible joke. Let's just have Joe, I think, should narrate it. I think it's a better one. 31 days, 8 hours, 33 minutes. You broke the previous fastest known time of this same sort of adventure by days. Which is just incredible. The previous was, I believe it was 34 days. Yeah, it was roughly 34 days. So you set a new line. It's an incredible feat. I will never know what it was like. I haven't done a 14er ever. So for me, it's like, you did 57? That's so monstrous. And you managed to do 57 in less, like you didn't do one a day. You did obviously more than one multiple times. So it's incredibly impressive, Joe. There's still questions in the chat room, and we'll get to some of these here in the post show. We'll do a quick post show with Joe. But is there another project? Is there something that's on your horizon that, yes, this is the next thing I want to do? Or are you content for a little bit and maybe looking at doing racing again?
Yeah, no, I definitely would like to process this and digest this and work on the film, and just being able to kind of do some cool stuff after having finished the trip. So making sure that I don't just just kind of move on to the next thing and shelf this and not not give it sort of the time that it deserves, sort of, I think, afterwards, in terms of digging into it a little bit deeper. But yeah, I'd like to do some more racing next year, of course, and then probably do a project or two along these lines. I definitely like the self-powered style and ethic. It's something that I think fits me well and corresponds to kind of who I am pretty well. And it's also there's a lot of possibilities. There's less limitations, and you can kind of set your own projects up, and however far that is, or it doesn't have to be a huge project. I just kind of think it's a cool way to travel and see your local environment.
It's pretty amazing, man. Huge congratulations. Yeah, extremely impressive, obviously. It's just one of those human feats of endurance that it'll stand for a long time.
Yeah.
As just being an incredibly special 31 days. It's nuts. And I was wonderfully corrected in the chat room. I said Richard Attenborough. That was the actor from Jurassic Park. David Attenborough is the narrator. I actually like saying Richard Attenborough spared no expense, and I think narrating this movie would be amazing. Complete side story. Joe, remind people where they can find you on social media, because I know that people are going to want to go back and look at these photos, which are incredible. And I know that you also have some of your small books, your photo books that you still have available. So where can people grab those as well?
Yeah, so my website's alpine-works.com, and you can find basically all of my info there. There's a shop link there for the book. And then my Instagram, Alpine Works, Twitter, Alpine Works, Facebook, same thing. So everything's under that handle.
Awesome. If you have any residual questions, if you're listening or watching here, any residual questions for Joe, reach out on any of those networks and he will get back to you. It was awesome and an honor to have Joe on the show. Once again, it was really great to talk to you about this one, man. This is one of those big undertakings, and it deserves as much accolades as possible to get to you. So thank you, Joe, very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
So stick around, guys. We're going to do a real quick post show because Kim has tons of questions. I've been ignoring you because I'm just like so fascinated by this. So Kim's going to rip through some of these questions here. If you still have some residual questions for Joe, bring them into the chat room. We'll pull those aside as well. But a quick post show, because tonight is the giant debate. It's a giant debate going on in the United States for the next president. So,
I can't vote.
Kim can't vote. But we're going to move into the post show and talk a little bit more with Joe Grant. Thank you very much for listening or watching tonight. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, youtube.com/thegingerrunner. New videos twice a week. And yeah, thank you all very much for the support. It was amazing. We all won that award this weekend. It basically goes to all of us. It was really a special moment. So we can share it all together. And that's pretty much it. Am I forgetting anything?
I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Let's move into the post show with Mr. Joe Grant. Stand by. Ginger Runner. I love it. The hashtag is already going, get Kim a vote in the chat room. So we got Kim a chair. Now we got to get Kim a vote.
In a couple years.
In a couple years, yes, when you are legal, fully legal. You're legal now. Citizen. Yeah. That's what it is. Yeah, you got your green card.
Sure. Question in the chat room from Julie. You kind of already answered this a little bit, but Julie asked, do you like longer adventures better than racing?
I think it's a mix. I like both for different reasons. I mean, racing's a great way to kind of engage with the community, to push yourself in a different context, which is a little bit there's a framework to be able to push yourself physically as hard as you can, which I think is fun and interesting. And so yeah, I like going to events. I really like going to races still, and continue to do those in the future. But the made sort of projects like this can be a really good way to open up new possibilities, to challenge yourself in different ways. And for instance, like wilderness travel, which is not, you can't race in wilderness areas, but there's just so much, cool wilderness to explore. So that's something that's, I think that, this allows us to be basically broaden your horizons a little bit.
Nice.
A question in the chat room from Paul. Favorite music for the trip, or did you listen to music during your adventure?
Yeah, did you rock the iPod, or did you have Signal out there so you could Spotify all your favorite tracks?
That'd be so much data.
A lot of data. That'd be terrible.
Yeah, no, I did listen to music. I like quite a lot of hip hop, and so a lot of Kendrick Lamar on the trip. And
awesome.
Also Audible, actually. I got into audiobooks. Listened to I was kind of debating whether listening to a book sort of is the equivalent of reading it or not. But there was long stretches of on the bike that I really appreciated having audiobooks. So I listened to the Agassi book and Open, which I thought was really good. And I thought was kind of a right. It wasn't. It's a pretty quick read, but engaging as well. And so it was an easy enough listen that you can be kind of pedaling along and not completely lose the story, or or you're wanting to stop to make notes all the time and that kind of thing. So yeah, that worked pretty well for me.
Yeah, I was curious if you brought along a book or something like that for you. You talked about getting into camp at 5 or 6, or just before dark, and maybe having an hour or two before, I'm guessing, you went to sleep. Was there anything that you did in that idle time? Were you just listening to tunes, or just kind of looking at the view, or what were you doing in the downtime? It
was a mix. Despite having quite an easy setup, there's still some setup. Kind of getting situated and. I don't know, setting up my bivy sack, finding a good tree, to sleep under. Just changing your clothes, eating, like everything kind of takes a little bit of time. And it's nice to just actually be able to just sort of chill and do nothing, and sort of disengage a little bit. But then, I would listen to music. I'd listen to some podcasts as well. So a mix of things, it just depended a little bit on the situation, how I was feeling, how tired I was, if I needed to kind of escape that moment a little bit because I was feeling, worked and a little bit vulnerable. And it's like, it's nice to just be in your little cocoon and listen to some tunes. And other times it's quite the opposite. I really, really want to be there and just sort of, want to engage with the environment more. So.
Got more questions here.
Question from Chuck in the chat room. Most interesting wildlife encounter during your trek?
Yeah, I'm curious about this too.
I saw a pretty cool bobcat, which was, not very uncommon here, but it was just very okay with me being quite close to it. And but the most, so I had a lot of goat encounters, a lot of mountain goats. But the funniest one was actually on Mountain of the Holy Cross. I camped by the trailhead, and this deer came in the middle of the night and started pecking at my sleeping bag. And I didn't at first. It worked me up. It's the full moon, so I could see what it was. But at first, I was really startled because it's a large enough animal that's there, and it's like sort of like pecking at my sleeping bag. So I shoot it away. It goes away, and it came back. In the same way, like a half dozen times. And it was this really weird thing where at first I was sort of like, oh, this curious animal. And then I checked to see if there's any food or anything there. And there's really nothing. So it's just like really curious about me, you know.
I think it liked you. It liked you, Joe.
Something was going on, you know. So
you may have smelled, like you were out there for 31 days, so you may have just smelled
the goat piss. Yeah, I did.
We got another question here.
A question from Pete in the chat room.
A good one.
This is a great question. What was the first real meal you ate when you got home?
So curious.
Oh gosh, I actually can't remember. I think
would you have made it, or would your wife have like, hey, I got you this amazing meal. Yeah, I got you a Snickers bar, or, something.
You know what happened? She said, my wife actually wrote and texted me and said, what do you want for dinner? Like, is there anything? And I was like, I honestly I just kind of want to sit on the couch and, be home. Like, I really don't care. And so I think we had salmon, actually, salmon and some sweet potatoes or something. So it was great. It was really good. I mean, home cooked meal and being able to sit on the couch and not move. But it's funny, as much as I thought that would be something like, really, really exciting. I think that I was just kind of too exhausted. Like, I got home, I was like, okay, shower, sit on the couch, eat kind of anything, go to sleep. Just felt really nice to be home. So
yeah, you think like, oh, I got a huge, thick, deep dish pizza or something, just terrible, big hamburger with bacon. I like the salmon and sweet potato.
Well, I also think it's the aspect of fresh food, right? Like, it's not gas station food.
Yeah, right.
No, you're right. Fresh food was really appealing. Like, hey, a lot of salads, a lot of fruit. Like, when I got back, I was just like, man, just being able to cook too and, prepare my own food again was really nice. So I think that there might not have been that kind of gnarly, like, oh, I need to, like after 100 or something, where you're just like, oh, I want to just eat, because that's kind of what I was eating the whole month. It's just junk food, So I got home and I was like, oh, I want juice or something,
just like real food. Yeah.
Just like something really good. Yeah.
That makes total sense. Joe, we're going to let you go. Man, it was just awesome to have you on the show again. You're an inspiration to a lot of people, including us, obviously. And this adventure, I can't fathom. I will never be able to fathom it. It's very impressive. It was an honor to have you on the show, dude. And thank you for sharing some of your story with us.
Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. For those watching live or watching the post show or listening on the podcast, again, go find Joe on social media at AlpineWorks on Twitter, alpine-works.com. And he has his book, book of Instagram photos and photography that he's done. And on Instagram, it's at AlpineWorks as well. So follow him. And if you have additional questions or something that maybe wasn't answered during the show, just reach out, because there's probably a lot that there's just so much stuff that happened, I imagine. There are a plethora of ways to get in touch with Joe to find out some of those answers. So thanks again, Joe, and thank you all for watching live. We'll see you guys next week, next Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, for another Gingerrun Live. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. We'll see you guys next week. That's it. Bye.